first thank Offer. They have organized this meeting in a wonderful way, and hope you are all enjoying this. And this has been a big job, and I really like to express my gratitude as well as applaud for their effort to make this happen. My name is Akiko Okifuji. My background is I have a PhD in clinical psychology, and I've been in the pain field, the pain medicine, for a long time. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Anesthesiology at University of Utah. I also work at the University of Utah Pain Management Center, and I'm a director of behavioral medicine service there. So today, what I'd like to talk about is lots of things, actually, primarily about stress, sex hormones, and fibromyalgia. Some of the things I talk about is from other people's study, and I'd like to also share what we've been doing in our laboratory at the Pain Research Center at the University of Utah. Okay. As you know, fibromyalgia presents a diverse range of problems. This is based upon over 400 patients who are in a treatment clinical trial that we are conducting up in University of Washington in Seattle. And based upon this, we can pretty much say that there are lots of different things that fibromyalgia patients suffer from. Most everybody say that the chronic fatigue is a problem, and muscle tenderness, not surprisingly, sleep disturbance, widespread pain, and some other pain syndromes, as well as anxiety and depression. In addition, you can see that some sensory dysregulation, perhaps such as feeling cold and paresthesia, the kind of funny tingling sensations, just expressed as if water being splashed on you, but even though there's no water coming to you. So this is a multi-symptom problem that fibromyalgia patients experience. And how common is fibromyalgia? Well, it's unfortunately very common. Up to 6 million people, 6 million Americans are suffering from this condition, and up to 20% of new patients presenting themselves to the outpatient rheumatology clinics in North America do meet the criteria, classification criteria. In the community samples, up to 11% of people do meet the criteria. And if you look at the men and women separately, the prevalence seems to be more common in women. This is based upon a community study. 1.6% of men and 5% of women do seem to qualify for the classification criteria for fibromyalgia. But if you look at the treatment-seeking fibromyalgia patients, women predominance kind of increased to 8-2 or perhaps even 9-1. So it's been thought that the fibromyalgia as a disorder is much more common in women. And based upon this, a lot of people started to think, well, you know, is this a gender thing? So in other words, it's that how people experience illness, how people learn to acquire illness or express illness, is that issue versus is it more biological problem? That may be actually distinguishing the commonality of men and women. Now, if you look at other types of pain problems, actually, this sex difference persists. If you look at the other types of chronic illness, chronic pain syndromes, with exception of cluster headaches and low back pain, pain problems are much more common in women than men. And if you look at the consumption of pain medications, women tend to consume more pain medications than men. Well, if you bring them to your laboratory and test them, giving them a noxious stimulation to see how sensitive they are to painful stimulation, women tend to exhibit much more sensitivity to painful stimulation than men do. So like I said, this question in terms of is that the sex difference or is that the gender difference? What I mean by this is sex difference being difference is based upon a biological difference, gender difference based upon the learning and psychosocial issues. Okay. There are a lot more interest actually in the biological side as well, that particularly if you look at the, it's much more common in women, such as migraine headaches and other types of chronic pain syndromes. But if you look at children before the age of pubescent time, the sex difference is kind of minimum. So this is prevalence data of migraine headaches by sex across lifespan. So you can see it sort of starts out similar. Let's see, I don't have a pointer, so I have to use this. So this is around the teenage time, right? And before this, too bad they didn't show this, but the prevalence between men and women, boys and girls, in terms of migraine prevalence is about the same. But you can see around the teenage time, then women start going much higher in terms of prevalence of migraine. And during the reproductive age, the difference seems to just separate itself. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. All right. And then after the menopause range, you can see that the prevalence for women tend to come down much more greatly than men do. And towards the geriatric side, the difference becomes very insignificant. So now the question is, okay, what changes around this time? And one of the potential factors is female sex hormones. Okay. And you probably know this, but I just briefly want to review that we don't know exact pathophysiology of fibromyalgia at this point. What we do know is there are a number of factors that seem to be associated with fibromyalgia, including low serotonin, low insulin-like growth factor 1, and HPA axis release dysregulation, particularly in face of stressors. And similarly, autonomic nervous system regulation seems to be somewhat dysfunctional. And there's a significant sleep problem, but particularly during the deep sleep, which is called the non-REM sleep, stage 4 sleep. And additional question is whether sex hormone is involved in this. Can you see this? Okay, this is. This is actually now fibromyalgia data. This has been published recently. You may or may not have this. I'm sorry, I changed my slides after I submitted my, I want to make it better, you know. So there may be some confusion. This is the data from pain, recently published by a group of researchers in University of Washington who study temporomandibular disorders. What they wanted to see is whether the pain severities across menstrual cycles change across, depending upon where you are in a cycle. And this right side one, this one, is women regularly menstruating and not taking oral contraceptives, okay? And this is the beginning of the menstrual onset, and they just reported on a daily basis worst pain and average pain of the day. Okay, so you can see that, well, I'm going to just put this. You can see at the beginning of the cycle, at the end of the cycle, the pain seems to go up slightly, and that's during around the time of menstruation. Now, the second group is women also menstruating, but using oral contraceptives. So during, up until probably this time, their estrogen and progesterone, they're taking combination, is supposed to be relatively flat. So they're supposed to have a stable amount of estrogen and progesterone instead of going up and down for like people in the first group. But the pattern of the pain seems to be fairly similar to the first group in that during the menstruation or around the menstruation time, their pain seems to be much worse. The third group, showing the flat line, are men. And obviously, of course, they do not have the cyclicity of hormones, and their pain seems to follow that. So these people sort of concluded that there may be something going on. At the time of menstruation, what happened is that there's a sudden drops in the level of progesterone and estrogen, and that may be the time that the people experience more pain. Okay, so the question that we wanted to ask was, how does sex hormones impact stress reactivity, pain, and other types of symptoms in women with fibromyalgia? Okay, so what do we know about sex hormones? There are a huge volume, actually, of studies coming out in animal studies trying to delineate what the factors of estrogen, progesterone, testosterone are on the responsiveness to opioid medications. There are a lot, but it's very confusing. Okay, opioid sensitivity by estrous cycles. So, different estrogen levels in rats and mice are very, very inconsistent. Okay, so there's no consistent pattern that the researchers can pinpoint which part of the cycle rats and mice tend to exhibit sensitivity to opioid. The sex hormones actually seem to have different effects on different types of painful stimulation. So that's also confusing. Why should that be different? Nobody knows at this point. If you remove ovaries from animals, it also produces very conflicting analgesic response to different types of painful stimulations given opioid medications. Now, testosterone also has a very strange effect. It seems to initially increases the effect of opioid medications, but then later it sort of suppresses it. So initially they may be getting lots of effect from pain medications, but then afterwards the effect is no longer there. So what we can conclude from these things is basically it's confusing, and we still don't know. Okay, so what about humans, right? There are lots of studies trying to see if women show different pain sensitivity across menstrual cycles. The problem with these studies are mostly the bad phasing and bad methodology. So this is, you see this figure here, okay, here, and this is a typical sort of distribution of estrogen and progesterone across time within the menstrual cycle, and this line represents ovulation. Okay, so you can see it goes up and down, and so does progesterone. What they often do is they sort of split the menstrual cycle into two across this line, and this is called follicular phase. This is called luteal phase, and they get people in once this time, once this side, and test them. The problem is that you can see the hormone levels actually vary quite a bit within the phase. So depending upon where you get them, you are hitting actually different levels of hormones. So you may be able to say, well, menstrual cycle has this effect, or menstrual phase has this effect, but you cannot say anything about hormones. So that's the confusion. That probably is reflected to the conflicting results that we see in the literature. But we do know, it's consistently with what a TMD study found, if you experimentally withdraw estrogen for people with migraine headaches, actually that can trigger migraine. So that the time of sudden decrease occurs around here. And there's a speculation whether that may be why a lot of people actually experience headaches around the time of menstruation. Well, pregnancy also represents a major hormonal event for women. So a group of researchers in Pittsburgh actually followed pregnant women who had a history of migraine headaches. But what happened was 1/3 of these patients said, well, my headache's better during pregnancy. 1/3 said there's no change, and 1/3 actually said, well, it's gotten worse. So, well, pregnancy obviously is a major hormonal event, but it's also a major life event. So that may be a lot of conflicting factors associated with it. Okay. We do know, one thing we do know is that the estrogen tends to suppress stress, physiological stress reactivity. These are the studies done by a group of researchers in Stony Brook. And what they did is very interesting. What they did was on the left side, they had a menopausal women, And they provided one-time estrogen patch and the other time placebo patch. So if you get the estrogen patch, you have an acute increase in the level of estrogen in your body. And they went through this stressful task, and so what happens to the reactivity? In this case, it's a systolic blood pressure. So you can see the clear difference, actually. Your blood pressure is supposed to go up, when you have stress, and that's what you expect. And it did, but when they had estrogen, the effect was not as much. You can see that. Okay, and the right side, this one's even more exciting, actually. What they did was they recruited young men, okay, and those men received a patch, estrogen patch, or placebo patch. So they had an acute increase in estrogen. This is nice because now you're eliminating gender factor here. You're purely looking at estrogen. Okay. And similarly, they went through stressful tasks. Oops, where is it? Okay, here it is. And in this case, it's epinephrine, but this is an indication of stress, physiological stress reactivity. And look how different it is. So when those guys had the placebo patch, the level went up as expected. But when they had an estrogen patch, their level just stayed low. Okay, so there's a significant suppression. So there has been a lot of talk about the protective mechanism of estrogen against stress. Okay. The stress reactivity, interestingly, is related to pain sensitivity. Their relationships are inversed. So in other words, when you have lots of physiological stress reactivity going on, you're less likely to feel pain. So there's and if your physiology is not reacting to stress as much, you're likely to experience more stress. For example, if you experimentally induces hypertension, people tend to experience much less pain. Okay, all right. And that has been shown in animals as well as humans. And let's go one step further. Fibromyalgia is related to impaired stress reactivity. So when you test them under the stressful conditions, their sympathetic reactivity is suppressed to various types of stress stimulations, including cold, physical, and noise. Okay, and also, this is also true for chronic fatigue people, but fibromyalgia patients are more likely to develop a hypotensive reaction when the postural challenge is imposed. Okay. So in summary, what do we know from the past research? Well, we don't exactly know what estrogen does. We do know that estrogen has something to do with reproduction. That side, we do know that. It also regulates menstrual cycle. We do know that. It helps your maintenance of good bone mass. We do know that. But when it comes down to pain, we do not know exactly what estrogen does. We do know that estrogen tends to suppress stress reactivity, and that stress reactivity now let's see, how does it work? Yeah, that's right. Stress reactivity seems to have anti-pain effects. And fibromyalgia is associated with hyporeactive, so they don't react as much to stress. Okay. So it feels better, doesn't it, if you say, well, you don't react as much to stress. But stay tuned, and what that means, we'll talk about that. Okay. Okay, let's talk a little bit about sex hormones and sleep. We do know a little bit about the relationship. The estrogen seems to influence body temperature regulation during the sleep, circadian rhythms, and stress reactivity, obviously. When women have a lower level of estrogen, progesterone, hypogonadal state, they do benefit a great deal from estrogen administration in their sleep. So they tend to have a shorter sleep latency, so they can fall asleep a little bit easier. And they tend to have a longer REM sleep. Estrogen treatment after menopause can help restore the normal sleep brainwave patterns. And hormonal replacement therapy is shown to improve the subjective measure of sleep. So they feel a little bit better. They feel like their sleep is getting a little bit better. Okay. So we did a small study, and we just presented this at the American Pain Society meeting a week ago, just about, in Vancouver, Canada. The question was, do fibromyalgia women experience differential sleep pattern across menstrual cycle? So we had a small sample of fibromyalgia patients, 12 people, and healthy women, age matched, 10 people, and we asked them to wear this watch-like actigraph. Some of you may know about this. It looks just like a watch, and it's just a black surface. You can't actually see anything for 1 month. What it does is that it measures the level of movement in a three-dimensional way, and based upon that, they can calculate a movement and the sleep efficiency in some other scores. And meanwhile, they came back 3 times to the laboratory to get their blood drawn, so we can get the estrogen and progesterone level. Okay. So in terms of phasing, remember phasing was a problem in previous studies? So what we did was we tried to get 3 differential combination times. In other words, we asked them to come back at the mid-late follicular time. That's when your estrogen is high but progesterone is low. Okay. Mid-luteal is the time when both estrogen and progesterone levels are elevated. And perimenstrual time, that's around the menstruation time. That's when both hormones show the decreased level. Okay. And there's no high progesterone, low estrogen time, so we don't have to worry about that. Now, I'm a little hesitant to show this, actually, but that's because this is based upon a very small sample, remember that, and when you have a very small sample of people, some peculiar things are bound to happen. And I'm saying this because I do know that I have a much larger data on estrogen progesterone level, and based upon that, there's no difference between fibromyalgia patients and healthy controls in terms of the hormonal levels. But for this particular sample group, okay, there's a difference in progesterone level during the mid-luteal time. That's when progesterone levels are supposed to be elevated. Okay. So I caution you with this. I don't think it's a definitive result, but for this particular group, this is what was found. Okay, so as expected, estrogen levels high during the follicular time and luteal time, but goes down when the perimenstrual time, and the progesterone is high during the mid-luteal time, but goes down during the follicular and the perimenstrual time. This is some of the sleep scores. So sleep duration is the amount you sleep, obviously, in minutes. There's no difference between the 2 groups, and there seems to be no difference across the menstrual cycle in terms of the duration of their sleep. Now, this is the sleep latency, so that's the time it takes you to fall asleep, basically, once you hit the bed. So if you are tossing and turning for a long, long time, sleep latency would be much greater. So the shorter sleep latency, the better, usually, unless you like tossing and turning. I don't think that's very common. But in any case, the purple line is the fibromyalgia women, and you can see that during the mid-luteal time, that's when their progesterone was higher. Their sleep latency, they seems to have a little more trouble falling asleep. Now, because of the small sample size, if you do a statistics, scientifically speaking, it's not significant, but graphically looking, there seems to be a trend. Now, sleep efficiency is how efficient your sleep is when you're lying down there in your bed. So the higher the efficiency, the better sleep you have. So the lower, the worse. And again, the mid-luteal time, fibromyalgia patients seem to be experiencing a lower level of sleep efficiency. Activity during the sleep, so how active you are. You don't want to be active during the sleep. So the higher the score, the worse it is. And there seems to be no difference across the time and between the groups. Okay. So what does this mean? We still continue to collect data on this, and we'd like to see this replicated in a larger sample. Because of the small sample, it cannot be conclusive, but there's a question as to what the progesterone, the role of progesterone may be in the maintenance of effective sleeping for fibromyalgia. The recent study shows that the acute administration of progesterone to healthy people in an IM injection seems to increase slightly, but the sense of sedation and sort of sense of sluggishness. So we're wondering if that effect is somehow compounding in the fibromyalgia pathophysiology. So we continue to investigate that. Now I'm going to move on and talk about stress now. Now, what is stress? Well, if you ask that to people, you get the different answers, of course. That's highly individual. But in general, stress means that it's our response, how we actually respond to the demand of daily living. We respond in different ways. And if we talk about stress reactivity, we're talking now about not only the emotional things that you experience, but lots of physical things that you may or may not be aware of. Okay. Basically, human body system strives for balance. Your body wants to have it balanced. So the homeostasis is very important, and the body works in a way to maintain the balance so that you can adapt to the shock to the system. So because the stress is a shock, stress is challenging your body. So the body is trying to balance things around inside of you to make sure that your body is fit to face the stress. Okay. And the stress, physiological stress reactivity is governed by the branch of nervous system called autonomic nervous system. Now, autonomic nervous system is a regulatory structure that help you adapt to change in your environment. Okay, it sort of helps you adapt and sort of acts in between your brain and your organs. Okay, so it's a middle person. And this is what it does. So here's your brain or the central nervous system, and all sorts of things happens in your environment. And when it's challenged, autonomic nervous system sitting in right here and trying to mediate the relationship between your central nervous system, and the internal environment, meaning the health of your internal organs and the function of your internal organs. This is, okay, so my screen's not too good on this one, but okay. And the autonomic nervous system has two branches. Sympathetic, you can see that from this side, and parasympathetic on the other side. Now, sympathetic side takes care of your stress side. Okay, so when you are challenged, sympathetic nervous system goes to work, and what it does is things like it dilates your pupils. Okay, you can feel that when you're stressed out, right? Or it inhibits your saliva. Your mouth gets dry. Your heartbeat goes faster, and so on and so forth. That's the things that you experience under pressure. And parasympathetic side is the opposite side. So they play a seesaw game, actually. So once the stress is going, you calm down a little bit. What the autonomic nervous system is doing is the parasympathetic side is going to work and changes how your organs are reacting. So your heartbeat, for example, slows down, and your muscle gets a little bit looser, and so on and so forth. Okay, so what happens under the acute stress? You know, if you're walking down the street very peacefully, minding your own business, and then suddenly you see a bear or something like that, what happens is that your blood pressure goes up. Okay, and there's a reason why it does that. Like I said, the autonomic nervous system is all about helping you survive, okay? And it tries to adjust your body to the environment. So your blood pressure goes up under the stress like that, so that the more blood can go up to your head. Your breathing gets shallower and faster. It's the same thing. It's more oxygen needs to get to your brain, okay? And you get pale. because the blood needs to get to the brain, so it doesn't have enough resource to go around to your surface skin levels. Okay, you get tense so that your muscles will be ready. So if you need to run away from something. Okay, the things like that happen, and that is all about survival. So that under the pressure, environmental pressure, you conserve energy that way. You conserve your resource. So your body prioritizes to help you go through some of the difficult time. So this is very important. The stress reactivity is actually very important. But the problem occurs more when the stress response does not come back down, or if you have chronic stress. If you have chronic stress and all these things happening all the time, what do you think will happen to you? Yeah, it's a lot of wear and tear to your system. Okay. All right. And that is also one of the what we call behavioral risk factors for illness. Illness is experienced in body, but lots of factors contribute to that, and some of them, I don't mean behavioral as in it's all in your head. I don't want you to feel that way. But what we do does make a difference in terms of health. The clear instance is such things like if you drink alcohol all the time, you get liver disease. If you eat, Big Mac all the time, you are likely to, nobody working for McDonald's, I hope. Then you have a higher risk of getting heart disease. Now, if you, come on. All right. If you have certain behavioral patterns and poor coping, that you are not equipped well to deal with stress, you are more likely to experience pain and, needless to say, more emotional distress. Okay. When we talk about stress, what comes to your head? Okay. Lots of different things. Let's just this is an example. The stressful things could be things like work-related things. Traffic could be bad. Social pressure could be significant. Paying bills. Holidays, actually, some people look forward to it, but nonetheless, there could be lots of things that have to be done. You think of Christmas shopping, right? Things like that. Okay. And what happens to you is what we call stress response. So from your personal experience, these are the kind of things you experience. And these are the kind of things that let you know that you are under stress. You might feel angry, or you might feel tensed up. Some people experience pain. You might have a cognitive things like, I can't remember where I put things, or you may experience anxiety. Now, a lot of times we feel like stressful things happens, and automatically stress response happens. So it feels like there's a direct relationship between two, but actually there are a lot of things happening in the middle, and we get to it a little later. So I just passed that now. Now, there are a number of stress management techniques out there that some of you may be actually quite familiar with, but I want to go over a few. One of the keys to successful stress management is to identify what types of things that stress you out. So you know your enemy, right? Some things like traffic, for example, could be very stressful to a group of people, but the same kind of circumstance may be actually nothing for other people. So what kind of things leads you to experience stress? And you're going to have to pay attention to your experience, because when you have the personal experience of stress, what's happening in your body is what we talked about here. Your sympathetic nervous system is working up, okay? And, it's also important that you need to understand what your stress responses are. So you need to know when things are happening, how do you know that you have stress? Okay. Do your muscle get tense? Some people do, other people don't, right? And do you get upset? Some people have a high tolerance, actually, and they may not get upset, or some people may totally freak out, okay? There could be behavioral things, like you get snappy to people, or you might withdraw. Other types of behavioral things could be happening. And physiological things. Some people get stomachache. Okay, and or other people actually have low-grade fever, or some people may break out. You know, there are different types of physiological responses. Okay, so like I said, it is a stressor from the things that stress you out to the response you experience is not a direct process. What's in the middle becomes very important. So the stressors and demands are here, and something happens here, and then you experience. This is not interpretation, actually. This should be response. I'm sorry, this is incorrect. And some of the processes you have a direct access, but others you don't. You know, things like your brain chemistry, you don't have a direct access to it. Even though it's part of you, it's you, but you cannot tell your serotonin where to go. Okay, and some of that is taken care of by your medications. That's what some of the medications do. It regulates the traffic of your neurochemistry in your head. But nonetheless, you do not have a conscious access to it. You cannot do the traffic direction in your head. But there are other things that you can actually have access to if you're conscious about it. Now, a lot of things are so automatic in your lives, and it feels like it's so natural. I'm that kind of person, you might say, and but it's always helpful to know your own processes. Okay. But even if you are successful, for example, the stress, one of the stress management techniques is to take a very close look at what stressed you out and evaluate if there's anything you can do about it, right? And there are things that some of the stressors can be eliminated or modified. Okay, if you are stressed out all the time, or whenever you drive highway, for example, what can you do? Yeah, don't go there, right? Yeah, take the back road. Okay, there's a cost to it. It takes longer if you don't take the highway, so you may have to leave home earlier. So there's a trade-off. But if you're willing to accept the trade-off, the cost, then you may be able to modify your stressors that way. Okay, but there are lots of stresses you cannot modify, like paying bills. If you modify that, you may get into trouble. Okay. And we'll get to it a little bit later, but stress happens, in other words. However careful you are, there's no stressless life. So what do you do? What can you do once you start experiencing stress? So now you know what goes on when you experience stress, and you recognize, oh, I am stressed out. What can you do? Okay. One of the things that people talk about is relaxation. But I'd like to mention something for you to think about. When we say relaxation, what comes to your head? What comes to your mind? Meditate, okay. Meditate, and someone said vegetate? Okay, deep breathing, yeah. There are lots of different ways that people try to relax themselves at the end of the day. But generally, if you go out there, you're more probably educated than the people out there. But if you go out there and ask people, what do you mean you want to relax? What do you want to do? A lot of people would say, well, I want to go home and sit down on the couch and vegetate and watch TV and do nothing. You know, that's the kind of things that people say. Now, that could provide you with a sense of relaxation. But when we talk about relaxation as a part of stress management, as a part of the treatment, the medical relaxation means a little bit different thing. What the relaxation should do is to manipulate. You have a control over your autonomic nervous system. So this is a direct self-manipulation of how your balance in the autonomic nervous system is working. Okay, remember that the sympathetic side and parasympathetic side. Your body tries to hit the good balance. But particularly when you're living with pain, chronic pain, balance that's supposed to be going like this, if you're healthy, but a lot of times it's going like this because of your chronic pain and chronic fatigue situation. Okay, so in that situation, it becomes even more important that you have a better control over your nervous system. Okay, the example is the deep breathing that Simon bring up. Why should the deep breathing help you? It's sure breathing is good. It's kind of necessary. We have to do it, but it's not just that. There's a reason why deep breathing is helpful for you. Now, if you do a shallow breathing, what happens? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's say if when you breathe in, the air goes through your airway and hits your lung. The lungs are the pair of bags, right, in your body. And if the air stops right in the middle or shallow area of your lungs, what happens is that that area is directly connected to sympathetic side. Okay, and the sympathetic side is the one for the stress, right? So, but if you can let your air all the way down and hit at the bottom of your lung, there's a area, let's see, here is a diaphragm. And of course, we talk about diaphragmic breathing. But when the diaphragm is exercised, it innervates itself to the nerve called vagus nerve. Okay. The vagus nerve takes care of 75% of the parasympathetic outflow. So it has a direct impact on your parasympathetic side. Okay. That is the reason why it's so important to do the diaphragmic breathing. How many of you exercise that regularly? Okay, good. Some of them, you want to try that? Okay. All right. I want you to place your right hand on your chest, left hand on your stomach, and do a deep breathing as you normally do. And out. Okay, good. Now, which hand moved? Left. How many of you experienced the right hand moving? Okay, left hand. Good. Both? Okay. If your right hand was the one who was predominantly moving, that means your breathing is shallow. Okay. And if you're both moving, it's probably mixed. What you want to experience is your stomach, the left hand moving. Okay. And I want you to, this is just like a key, the hint of successful breathing, but breathe through your nose, out through your mouth. And when you breathe out, go slower, much, much slower. So go, okay. And when you breathe in, your left hand, the one on your stomach should move. And it would initially, if you're not used to it, it would make you feel like you're eating air. Okay. But you're not eating air. But that's the area that you should be inflating. So your stomach should come out as you breathe in, and as you breathe out, it goes in. So that's something that that you can keep in mind when you practice. Okay. There are a number of books out there that can help you with that. Yes?
What is parasympathetic? I mean, how does that affect the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic system? How does I can understand why it's better to breathe deeper.
Okay. When air hits at the bottom of your lung, it's sort of adjacent to the diaphragm. So diaphragm moves and it gets exercised. And then that sends a signal through the vagus nerve. When the vagus nerve receives the messages, it shoots directly to the parasympathetic nervous system. Let me just go to the next one. Okay. So this is a anatomical graph. So the vagus nerve is connected to different areas. You can see that. This is the vagus nerve. And the diaphragm right here, when it gets exercised, it sends a signal through it. And the parasympathetic nervous system gets activated that way. Does that? Okay. All right.
Are you saying that basically what he's saying, if you don't degrade the oxygen actually does not penetrate the brain like.
Oh, it goes, yeah, you're getting plenty, yeah. For example, if you have a shallow breathing, it's going to, you are getting oxygen, but your diaphragm is not moving that time, okay. Okay, so let's talk about the process a little bit. So as I said, that there's a process between when things happen, the stressful things, icky things happen, to the time that you experience stress. And like I said, there's things you have direct access to, there are things you don't have access to. Okay, the example is this. Suppose that this talk determines my future, okay? And then I'm sitting at the dinner table and thinking like, my God, it's going to be totally a disaster and it's going to be awful. I'm going to mess this up and people will think I'm no good. What do you think I would be feeling? That's right. I would be very nervous. I would be tensing up and I'd be probably sleepless. I may not be able to eat. In other words, I'll be freaking out. That'll be bad, all right? Now the same situation, same scenario, sitting at the dinner table eating exactly the same thing, but I start thinking, this, okay, well, it's going to be tough, but I know my stuff and I do my best, that's all I can ask. Would I be nervous? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I would be nervous, yeah, okay, but it will be a mid-range anxiety, okay, and I would likely to be able to eat something at least, and I did, actually, yesterday. It was good. And I'll be able to sleep, and I did. So in other words, I won't be freaking out, okay. So it's the same situation, okay, same scenario, same person, very different responses, right? What happened? Okay, all right. It's right. So it's how I size up the situation. Okay, we always size up every situation we get in. You come into this room, you're sizing up. Okay, but a lot of things are automatic. You're driving down the street. You look at the stop signs. You're sizing up. You see the red, you hit the brake. You see the green, you hit the gas, you see the yellow. Hopefully there's no, yes?
I think as chronic patients, I think they have a harder time seizing things up properly in a right frame of mind.
It is difficult because you're distracted. You're distracted by your symptoms, and you're generally feeling icky. So it's difficult to redirect your attention, and that requires practice. Okay, it's not easy to do, but it's even more important, therefore, to go against it and trying to at least recognize a few. You don't have to be aware of everything you do, because you're going to be exhausted if you try to do that. But the few critical things, if you know that these things are bad for me, when these things happen, I'm exhausted, I'm done for the day. If you can identify those things, it's good to know what goes on. Okay, and you look at your process, you may like it actually. You might say, well, there's no problem with that. I live with that. That's your choice. But this, you have a choice. Okay, it'll be you, up to you, not up to your fatigue, not up to your pain. A lot of times, chronic illness like fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, what it does is it totally sort of possesses your life, you know. So it's sort of like you have to ask your pain or you have to ask your fatigue, can I do this? Can I do that? So you don't have the authority to determine your life sometimes. So to go over that, you need to start regaining little by little the control. And this is something you can control. Or this have a choice, whether to go along with what's going on or to modify that. Okay. And some of the common things that tends to get people into trouble are the specific thinking styles that have been extensively studied in the pain world. Things like the most common thing probably is a should statement. Okay, I should have done that. I could have done that. I should do this. I should do that. Yes.
I was in a conference one time and they were talking about this. They said, don't ever let anybody should on you.
That's right, God. That's good. Yeah. All right. And I must say, it's so common, and it's not that if you do this, it's you're a bad person. Everybody does this, but some people are more prone than other people to do this. So listen to you talk. Listen to you how you try to look at how you're sizing up. Things don't go well. What do you say to yourself? Oh, I should have blah blah blah. Okay, and to think of the consequence. Okay, and catastrophizing. What does it mean to you when it's a catastrophize?
That's like worry.
Yeah.
I know it's gonna.
It's like a worst possible outcome you expect. No matter what it is that may be going on, you may have actually a potential outweighs, but what you expect is the worst possible scenario. Okay. And emotional reasoning is an interesting one that it may require some explanation. When things are bad, you just want to kick and have a tantrum. And that's your natural response. And then reasoning sort of leaves you, and emotion comes overwhelming. Okay? So if when you're feeling bad, you tend to interpret things in a negative way. Emotion sort of takes over. And it's not an easy thing when the emotion takes over. But it helps to understand that, okay, I'm feeling bad now today. This is a bad day for me. And it's possible that I'm not thinking straight. I'm not looking at things in a way that I can, actually. And just be aware, it's not to reprimand you. It's not to criticize yourself, but to aware that you are having a disadvantageous day today. Okay. Okay, the very extreme thinking would be a black and white, which is common in people living with chronic pain situations. So black and white, if your performance is a tiny little bit not perfect, you're a total failure. Okay. So in a student sense, if you don't get straight A's, if you had, 1 A minus, you're a total failure. Okay. If your health is not perfect and you're not running around in the soccer field, treatment is a total failure. So that is a very common way. And is it reasonable? Okay, you can say, when you find your thinking style, what you want to do is just to simply question yourself. It's not to make a judgment whether that's correct or incorrect, but to say, is that the sort of like a defense lawyer, cross-examining you? Is there good evidence for that? Can I support this statement reasonably? What you are feeling is what you are feeling. There's no, correct or wrong answer. But just to take a look at whether what you are saying is reasonable or not. Catastrophizing is fairly common, particularly when you're feeling not so good. It's easy to do it. But again, be aware that you're doing is important. Okay, and a should, must, things like that. Okay. All right. This is just an example. This probably is a painful example. A pain tends to go up when you exercise, and the physical therapy, for example, in our clinic, it's a key component in the rehabilitation medicine. But unfortunately, it has a side effect. It makes you sore sometimes. Okay, and it's discouraging, of course, when the pain goes up. And that's not, you're coming to a clinic to get help, to eliminate pain. And why is it that I'm experiencing pain? It isn't fair. And I agree, it's really unfair. But, so how can you look at the situation this way? Here we go again. Okay, so I don't like pain, but I know it's just temporary. I will never get better. Look how I'm feeling that right now. I'll never get better. Is that a fair statement? It feels that way, I know. It feels that way, but rationally looking at, is there any good evidence that's supporting it? I'm like a defense lawyer here. Okay, maybe not. That's something for you to think about. Okay, I did it yesterday, I can do it today. Well, my physical therapist wants me to hurt. No physical therapist, I hope? Yeah. Okay, some clinicians may look that way, but really, they mean well. Okay, they should really let us rest. I'm tired. I don't want to do this. Okay, I know you feel that way sometimes. I go to the gym and I feel that way too. But is this reasonable? That's something for you to think about. And again, I strongly believe that you should be the one who has an option. You should be the one who can decide how you want to feel and to help yourself. All right. This is it for the slides, and I'd like to entertain some questions if you have any. All right, thank you. Oh, okay, yes.
Could you explain polarized thinking and filtering those stress responses or coping mechanisms?
Okay. Filtering is, let me just bring up the slides. Filtering is actually also very common, that when you are in a certain frame of mind, you choose what you want to hear. So any negative components of the situation, it filters through. So you may be just looking at the negative side only and sort of ignoring the positive side. And when that happens, obviously, you don't feel too good. Okay, and what was the other one? Polarized thinking is that the black and white, that's the extreme thinking. Yeah. Yes?
What about controlling fallacies?
Controlling fallacies. It was risk of contradicting myself a little bit, but we do feel like there has to be a total control over everything. Okay, and it would be nice if we can do that, but that is not realistic thing. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.